Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Anders Gupta, and I look after the organizational culture function at AMP. I would like to officially welcome AMP employees, board members, and members of the press to this very interesting session. Before I begin, I'd like to pay my respects to the traditional owners and custodians of this land, and my respects to the elders past and present. It is with great pleasure that I welcome Nick Udall of a company called Nowhere. I'm envious when you work for a company called Nowhere, because when you go to work, you can say you're going nowhere. As one of my colleagues rightly pointed out this morning, it's a lot better than saying I'm going everywhere. I had the pleasure of attending an ideation session earlier today with Nick, and it was absolutely mind-blowing. And it was mind-blowing because it was simple and meaningful. And we explored different models of leadership and what's going to be meaningful and relevant to us today in our world of volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. And what Nick helped us today was to answer a fundamental question. In this world, what's the role of a leader? Because it's not about me and it's about Nick, let me welcome Nick Udall.
Thank you. Can everyone hear me okay? So thanks for the invite, and it's interesting that it's called Amplify. You'll see in a minute that I use the concept of amplification and frequency quite a lot. So it's an accident rather than just for you guys, but frequency for me is the key to this, the edge of leadership. So this is a cymatics video. This is when you tune the frequency or change frequency, it reshapes matter, in this instance sand, and how it reorganizes itself at different frequencies. I believe this is the role of leadership, is how to tune the frequency of an organization, teams, and it will then manifest into new forms that are more productive, more creative. So we work with a fundamental hypothesis that innovation and productivity emerges from an energetic frequency, not just a process. In fact, the energetic frequency comes first. The way we think, learn, organize either moves us towards that frequency or away from it. And you'll see in a minute there's lots of stuff that nearly every organization does that unconsciously moves away from this frequency. So I believe the leadership challenge of our time is to tune the frequency of organizations. So a lot of our work is about tuning culture, tuning leaders, tuning teams. So give you a bit of context of where I come from. I'm originally a product designer by background. I got very disillusioned with the design world and then did a PhD on creativity and consciousness, which was how do you identify the code for breakthrough? How do you help people get to moments of breakthrough? And then extend that further to how do you create moments of collective breakthrough? And then how do you make that the way you do things around here, i.e. the culture? I, with 5 other colleagues, founded Nowhere 20 years ago. I've been working 25 years now, working with leaders and teams, particularly the exec team of global companies since the age of 23. I still don't know why they listen to me, but I keep talking, and it seems to be okay. But more importantly, it's a practice. Nowhere is not an expert consultancy, it's a hidden practice. We don't promote particularly what we do. It's very rare for me to do a talk. I like to be hidden and behind the scenes. But somehow we got connected to the World Economic Forum, and I started to lead a council on new models of leadership with people like Otto Scharmer and all the other big MIT, Harvard academics, lots of fantastic practitioners, in a time when the quote from the World Economic Forum was, leaders are hitting a ceiling and there is a quantum shift in context happening. And most leaders haven't been trained or prepared for this context. I'll explain more later. And part of what we're also passionate about is education. So I obviously work mostly with senior leaders, execs, but what we teach them should be taught at school. And creativity and how you work with the unconscious, the unknown, is just not taught at school. And so we do a lot of work in schools over the world. So Nowhere is designed to tune the frequency of global systems. Sounds odd. I do not feel apologetic for it at all, because it puts this into a different space that I'm very excited by. And as you'll see in the next half an hour or so, I don't think this couldn't be a more exciting time for leaders. I think there is a massive threshold coming. It's coming fast, and leaders need to get over it very quickly. I'm interested in how you tune frequency to move into the hum, that state of feeling on purpose and in flow. I use the word hum because it's quite accessible. You all kind of will have an experience of knowing when you're in flow and in hum, individually and collectively. I believe you can do this as a leader, and you can do it by design, not by accident. And this way of working and leading helps tackle some critical issues. So this is really what we're normally brought in to do. Those issues that companies have struggled with for years and years because they've been using the same orthodox, and our interest is how you break through that. We believe that strategy as a discipline is transforming, and just doing the same old strategic disciplines are hitting ceilings rapidly. So we come in and introduce very different ways of doing strategy through pattern recognition, immersion. I suppose our mainstay is building cultures of innovation, which you'll see in a minute for us is a higher state of evolution of a culture. And we're very interested in the difference between high performance, which is norms, metrics, rules, it's driven, it's hard, as opposed to peak performance, where you move into elegance and flow states. And then in peak performance, you come back out of it and then back into it. I travel a lot. We're all over the world, very small specialist teams. To tune a culture, we don't do it, we help leaders do it. But it only takes about 2 or 3 of us to work with a system to shift 50,000, 60,000, 100,000 people. So it's very, should I believe in the term, homeopathic. You find the pattern and move it to another level. So why tune frequency? Well, let me tell you that, in one sense, you'll know all of this, but let me give you the logic. As I said already, there's a quantum shift happening in context. I regularly get phone calls from very senior leaders, often CEOs of global companies, who are saying, I don't know what to do next. Which is admirable, because they have the humility to ask that question. And I find most of those leaders are amazingly exciting and wanting to push the boundary. But they haven't had the experience of what's needed now. Most people haven't. Institute for the Future, this is the classic term. You've probably heard it over and over again. It's 30 years old now, this term, the VUCA world. But my God, it's happening more and more and more. This is not going away. The trick is how to traverse it and navigate it, and particularly from an innovation and creativity point of view, how to leverage it. Wall Street Journal, obviously in that context, one of the most powerful ways of navigating it is innovation. It is the DNA and engine room of any good business. Any good business. Innovation is the key, which unfortunately means that creativity is something you've got to pay attention to as a leader, because that is the DNA, the wellspring of innovation. And we are not taught about creativity at any point in our education, in my belief, in any substance. Creativity for me isn't about art or poetry, the disciplines. It's about the skill of being able to dance between the known and the unknown and discover new things as you go. This topic isn't going away, creativity. Even in 2016, it's in the top 10 skills of leadership. However, to tune the hum, when I saw this list last year, Tuning the hum of a system, the high art of leadership, requires at least 8 of these 10 things. They're not separate from me, and anyone that starts to look at them separately is missing the point. They're an interconnected set of levers to tune culture. Obviously, leaders now need to deal with technology in a fundamentally different way. It is not an enabler, it's embedded. It's not an endpoint anymore. I heard one of the speakers earlier talking about the generations, digital natives coming in thick and fast. And the challenge of leaders is to always pay attention to the entry-level generation, because they change everything. It's not that the digital natives, you have to worry about them in 20 years' time. You have to start understanding how they think and work now, because everyone reorganizes to the lowest generation coming into the workplace. I think this is a very interesting one as well. Health, well-being, mindfulness, but actually in a creative context and in tuning culture, you've got to learn how to use stress, not just minimize stress. And it all comes back to culture for me. I don't believe culture is a soft thing. I think it is the highest art of leadership to shape culture, because everything comes from it. Everything, including strategy. And that's what actually the limitation of strategy is. It's often generated through the existing culture and is full of all of the other baggage and filters of before. So therefore, it's pretty much the same again with a little bit different. And to summarize that for me, leaders are hitting or meeting problems and opportunities that are more complex, blurred, hyper-dependent, etc. You can read the slide, than ever before. Moving a system to a much more elegant level of performance or innovation, it's complex. They're not simple things anymore. And to think that as a leader you can stand in the middle of that problem and solve it with your big brain and some resource around you, those days are often gone. As is that last sentence, that all you need to do is somehow work harder and longer to solve the problem. Most organisations, I am expecting you to be one of them, is you probably can't work any harder or longer. There is not more time in the day. So you've got to learn to work differently, and you've got to help as a leader yourself and others learn to work differently. So there is a real edge we see organisations hitting against. And one of the theories that best explains it for us is, if you haven't seen it, the work of David Talbot on different levels of ego development, and particularly in a cultural context. That every organisation starts off as an opportunist. There's a gap in the market, a need, a benefit, something to go after. It's an entrepreneurial energy. It then often evolves to a culture that needs to know more about that area. So therefore you're trading on your expertise, not just the gap in the market. You need to become more expert than others. And then you scale and replicate that to become what's called an achiever culture. Classic high performance. So I usually tell, it's probably not a good metaphor these days, but Dell started off as an opportunist company with its business model about how you actually built your own computer. They became expert at it and created a chain-linked supply chain in effect that was very difficult to compete with. And then they scaled it, and in the first 20 years they became an $80 billion business. And then they hit the ceiling, where just doing more of the same wasn't going to work, and what was their differentiator became the core competence of the industry. Their challenge was, as is most organisations now, is how do you break through into a different state of consciousness culturally, into what's called the innovator shaper, which I'll explain. But these cultural levels happen at team level. I still see lots of teams, which is very scary, that meet in an ad hoc fashion, often around the agenda of a superior leader who just says we need to get together based on my agenda and my need, and we need it now, which I find very scary, but it happens a lot. Then they evolve into an operational team that has more rhythm and focus, is about driving the knowns and managing the knowns. This is the dominant team form, by the way. Then if you're lucky, you move into a strategic team that learns to work with pattern and rhythm and sequence often is not the same as an operational team. And that's where people get confused. And the ideal is to be able to also move into a creative team, where you are learning as a team to work with the unknown. Push the boundaries. Just to be very clear, these are nested levels. You need all of them. You don't just need to move to the higher end, you need all of them. But it also works at the level of leadership. Reactive leaders, a bit like a thermostat on and off. Responsive, who've learned over time a few more different ways of responding to a situation through experience. Proactive, where you're challenging the paradigm. And evocative, where you're actually calling forth the untapped potential of a system. I'm interested in how organisations move over that fourth threshold, what we call the fourth realm, where the frequency shifts, where people move into this hum and this state of flow. And there's a lot of research being done on this state of collective flow. But the basics of this fourth realm is that you, in every moment, in every meeting, are able to appropriately dance between the known and the unknown. You don't just manage that known to the nth degree. And it's a dance. It's elegant. It's fluid. It means that the black, the unknown, becomes available to you, which is the key to innovation and actually, ironically, productivity. What is currently unconscious is unavailable. What is currently invisible is unavailable. And most organisations predominantly flatline. They pretty much do more of the same and just work harder at it and turn the handle, which in today's world is stupid. The challenge is to find this dance and to create it in every interaction, in every team, which starts with the power of questions. For me, one of the critical components of great leadership is great questions. You activate a system through the power of questions, not by giving it answers. As soon as you give a system an answer, you kill its curiosity and you kill its desire to learn. It just becomes implementers. So I would ask every leader, what are the most powerful questions you are working on and you are involving others in? A question puts us on a quest. But I'm interested in how you get to these two exclamation marks. For me, this is the symbol of breakthrough. There's two exclamation marks, one which is, I've had the breakthrough. It is an output. I've got a breakthrough strategy, culture, product, service. I've got something tangible. But I've also got a transformational outcome in that I and those that have been part of the breakthrough have changed. We can no longer go back to what we thought before. We have reordered our thinking and our collective pattern of thought, and we've moved somewhere new. This is different to ideation, which is predominantly done within the existing paradigm and is just more of the same. And you can get very excited about brainstorming ideation. We could have a fantastic time today, come up with a list and prioritize them, and wake up tomorrow and just think, it's not very good. But an insight is different. At that moment of insight, you change. Your energy changed. You become a wellspring. That's when you know you've got an insight. And I'm a passionate believer that action should only follow insight. People just get busy being active that isn't driven by insight. And you just get busy. And you get addicted to busy. As I was saying in the workshop this morning, a classic symptom of that is if you have a meeting culture where the success of the meeting is determined by your clarity and list of next actions. That is not the success of a good meeting, more action. Having actions is fine, but that should not be the success criteria. I'll come back to that. But I'm also interested in how in these moments you create collective breakthrough. A lot of our work and this methodology is how as a leader do you create space where the collective has at the same time a moment of insight. Not separately, which is the first stage, but collectively. I joke that we have a particular methodology, which is a 4-day process, often with the CEO and 7 invited other people. And on the 4th day at 11 o'clock in the morning, and I say this on the Monday, so on the Thursday morning, you're going to have a breakthrough at about 11 o'clock. A collective breakthrough, where at that 11 o'clock, it's all going to go, everyone's going to go, that's it. It's 11:07, 11:28. I give myself a bit of leeway, but you can design breakthrough, collective breakthrough, in my belief, to that type of timescale. However, the importance of it is when you have a collective moment of breakthrough in a meeting or in a group or in a conference, it becomes a seared memory that resources you to go and act upon it. For some reason, a collective breakthrough gets lodged in here more powerfully than an individual one. You'll never forget that collective moment, which is a really important asset. How do you then move into flow states and help your team and your groups move into that state? For me, this is the challenge of leadership now. This is not by accident, it's by leadership. And the beauty of it is that once you've touched into it, you want it more. This is a classic developmental mistake. It's not linear. If you can get people to leap to a peak experience, they yearn to get back to it again. So you're turning that to your advantage as a leader, for all good reason. You can also start to get into spaces where a collective intelligence starts to manifest. You start to tap into a bigger knowing field, and you're able to see other patterns that others can't see. And then you move into peak performance. A lot of research being done on this from a neurophysiology point of view, but you move into a state of effortlessness. It doesn't last long, unfortunately, but you can get to it, and you can get to it for extended periods, and you can get there by design. So for me, the edge of leadership is how leaders start to play with these elements. I was taught recently the difference between excellence and sublime by a very famous Israeli choreographer. He says, I'm not interested in my dancers being excellent. Excellent is just the high end of mediocre. And that is not good enough in today's world. What I'm interested in is my dancers experiencing sublime moments where they do things they never thought they could do. So my challenge to any leader now is, how are you creating the space for your people and yourself? Because you've got to live it. Create sublime moments where everyone starts to surprise themselves, and how surprise becomes a critical part of your leadership responsibility, helping people do things they never thought they could do. There are a few useful benefits of moving to this fourth realm by choice. Staying there is difficult, but making it available is really important. Our physical, mental, psychological, creative, all these capacities become magnified, which I should have put in amplified. Our creativity, productivity, all of these good words go through the roof. A new world opens up. Things that were previously hidden, unavailable to us, becomes available. I was having an interesting conversation this morning about it. Is we can often run a series of breakthrough projects around business critical issues. Let's say top 10 billion-dollar teams we were working with one company, the new ventures. And it's not that difficult to get breakthrough in each of the 10. But it doesn't mean you should act upon every breakthrough. But every breakthrough opened up a possibility that no one ever thought before. Doesn't mean you act upon it. So opening possibility is one thing, acting upon it is another. It's interesting, classic one in peak performance and peak sports activity is that you feel like you are literally creating and shaping the future in the moment. You are right surfing the edge of what's possible. By the way, a really important benefit, the best possible version of yourself turns up to this. You have no choice. To play this game, you have to turn up, which is compelling and exciting and rewarding. And there's a big happy quotient that comes with it too. You develop new skills, and if I was going to highlight one, pattern recognition, pattern acquisition is a critical skill that most people don't understand is key to strategy and innovation. You move to high performance to peak performance, and a recent study talked about how this moves, you actually become 5 times more productive, which isn't a bad thing. But here's a really interesting shape for us. We see a lot of organisations that achieve a third level, pushing harder, working longer. The cost of those types of cultures is they're time poor. This is a really important criteria. If you're a time poor organisation, you're hitting up against that ceiling. Where productivity gets confused with busyness, and you just get obsessed with measuring yourself against everyone else. This means you're losing your sense of identity, and all you can do is get your sense of yourself in relationship to others. And if I go back one, the cost of that is you start lots of stuff. It never quite does what you wanted to do, so you start more stuff. You just get busy doing stuff, where everyone gets proud about, this is why I'm doing this. But the real movement is a different movement. It's actually learning how to slow down and play with time differently. Peak performance is not a linear push. It's actually an understanding that there is a recovery breakthrough. To peak performance is peak, recover. It's not push. You become time rich, and movement becomes elegant instead of workmanlike. And you become confident in your core identity and your difference. So a shift is happening, where a lot of organisations get stuck on the right. You still need, on the left, you still need to do this, but just doing this is scary. To an organisations, and I'm seeing this just starting to happen in the last 2 years, organised moving to include the right. Let me point out a few. I said the first one, time rich to time poor, or time poor to time rich, better. Risk averse and tolerant of mediocrity to understanding how risk heightens focus, which is the key to moving into a flow state. Or how you go from fact-based decision making. I've seen this recently. It's been a disaster of some huge business deals I've been watching and been very close to. But if only they had understood the deals from a pattern point of view, they wouldn't have done it. They've done it through the facts and the numbers, makes great sense. But when you don't look at the pattern of which those numbers sit within, and I've seen tens of billions of market cap lost because of that shift didn't happen. You can read the rest. But let me try to make it simpler, because as I said at the beginning, I'm interested in how we get to the simple things that make the difference for leaders. So here's another way of looking at the same thing. There is a ceiling being hit. In a time-poor, busy culture that's driven at one speed, often in that ability you can't work any harder, what happens is fragmentations and silos start to gain more power, and hierarchical power plays run the show. It becomes unsafe to speak and take risks and challenge the orthodoxy, which makes everything mechanical, rigid and slow. All you can do is work harder and longer, which is really painful, demotivating, and it becomes quite an aggressive movement. Archetypally, you might recognize some of them. To get over that threshold, your job as leaders is to move to how to create a time-rich, productive, multi-speed culture where you create integrated teams around value drivers. Functions and business units are not value drivers. They're organizational structures. How do you create integrated teams around the value drivers? Where you create a culture where, it's a classic term, speak up, but you're able to work with the most candid, challenging feedback to each other, where you share work in progress rather than polished presentations. You constructively ask for feedback and challenge regularly, and people give it to you full on. But they don't take it personally, because it's all part of a bigger endeavour to move to something new and different. I was saying the story earlier today, that type of culture where you can really hold the tension of difference, challenge, conflict, emotional disturbance is the key. And I saw this, I've seen this many times, but when I was most struck by it was with a biotech company called Genentech. It's one of the most amazing biotech in San Francisco. And you go into that culture. First you get hit by the hum as you go through the door. I believe you feel that within the first 30, 60 seconds of meeting a system. You get a sense of whether they're humming and on purpose. But when you saw these guys in meetings, they had the most brutal arguments I've ever seen. Passionate, Extreme, but no one took it personally. It was all because they were pushing it to the limit to find something new and allow something new to pop. You're seeing a lot of language now when you get into that type of real timeness, real authenticity, you can get into agile swarming mentalities where systems start to repattern around the critical needs. You then move to the breakthrough recovery cycle, and often the thing that holds this and sustains that way of working is deep purpose-driven organizations. Your identity needs to be driven by core purpose. So, fortunately, there is a simple secret sauce to how to do this, and I'm going to give you 2 different clues to it. There is a simple methodology that we summarize in 4 images. It's how, and I heard it at the end of the last talk, how as a leader you step out from the middle and hold spaces where diversity can come around a common larger endeavor, where you leverage the difference of intersection, which is the lifeblood of everything, productivity, creativity, innovation. It's leveraging difference. To the extent that that difference can be put under pressure and you stay with that tension rather than avoid it, deflect it, save it, which a lot of leaders do. But you literally tension it so it starts to heat up. And you stay there long enough until it starts to repattern, because it naturally repatterns. You actually, at this point, don't need to do anything other than stay with it. And then a pattern of new possibility emerges. 4 simple things that if leaders do in every meeting, in every journey of meetings, whether it's about innovation, strategy, operational effectiveness, because this breakthrough gives you all of those benefits. But let me make it even simpler. 4 simple things to tune culture. Most leaders are leaders through force of hierarchical place, where you happen to have people who report to you. They don't necessarily, doesn't by default create a team, it just means they all report to you. And the problem with that is you're at the center, you put yourself at the center with your big brain, strokes arguably big ego. The cost of that is you get bigger, you become more central. You join the dots. You're the playmaker. Some people love that and they'll move towards you, and some people get repelled by that and move away from you, which now creates one of the most dangerous things, which is people that are in the in-team and people on the outside team, which is very dangerous. And then people make lots of stories about this and lots of fantasies, and it corrupts everything. This is a leader taking up space, which by default we've been trained to do, by the way. So this is no one's fault necessarily. The challenge is how you step out of the middle. You bring people together into creative relationship, where you are not at the center. You are the holder, the host, the catalyst. Where in those intersections and following the image of the 4 bits before, you regularly move to breakthrough. Whether that's in 30-minute meetings, 1-day meetings, 3-day conferences, overextended periods of time with key project teams. How are you holding the space for breakthrough? Not just workman-like work. This is about, and this is what we're doing in the workshop this morning, your job as a leader is to hold spaces where people surprise themselves with what they can achieve. This act of, I didn't know we could do that, this disbelief expands people's belief systems. So how are you helping yourself and your team do things they never thought they could do, rather than just do more work? And there's simple things of doing that. How, as a leader, you open the space just by how you turn up, just by how you start a meeting. Opens more space for possibility or closes it. Beginning of the meeting is always the key to the success of the meeting. Do you, in the meeting, slow down and build the relational and energetic container, or do you just jump to the agenda and the task? If you actually can connect people, slow people down, tune the listening, your productivity will go through the roof. And if without that psychological safety, you're not going to have an authentic meeting. You'll have a pseudo meeting with people playing games with each other, which means you'll probably have the same conversation again and again, next meeting, which is just stupid. But if you can get the blue and the green right, you more regularly can go into the south, which is the holding the tension, stepping into the unknown, pushing the boundaries of possibility, really staying there long enough for something new to emerge. The point is to create spaces where newness happens, new patterns of thought that lead to new action. That is the only purpose of a meeting. It is not to sit there and receive PowerPoint and to look interested and to comment on something that's your agenda. The whole point of having the brains in a room is to think new things together that get you to somewhere better. But to do that, you then have to come to what we call the micro moments. These things come and go fleetingly. A meeting for me is measured on the critical moments that shifted us in a meeting. An insight, a collective breakthrough, a question, something that popped where we all shifted. But these things are momentary, they're fleeting, and we often miss them. But once again, it's a similar type of thing. What are those skills, the practical skills in the moment that open up a new possibility? That could include just giving someone a damn good listening to. Opens a possibility for them and you that previously doesn't exist. How you connect people through feedback. How you shift through learning to work with pattern. And how you recognize moments where we shift, which is an energetic body feeling before it's a head feeling. Some other micro skills that shift in the moment. Critical use of questions, how to deepen the listening, how to journaling and tagging, how to actually notice these moments and tune yourself in. Meetings aren't just about the information going in, they're about the information that arises in the moment. And this isn't next actions, etc. Giving you a flavour. Here's one that really drives me balmy. And I'm putting this to very senior leadership teams, because that's my experience. But most senior leadership teams are made up of really bright, amazing people. But for some reason, when they get into a room together, they become less than the sum of the parts. It really bugs me. It's kind of like, you guys are amazing separately, but when you get together, for some reason you cancel each other out or play off each other. And just, surely the potential is greater than this. Well, one of the critical things here is, how do you help teams do that? You have to create that multiplier effect, that amplification. And there are a number of codes we've been decoding for the last 20 years of how a team floods itself with energy. How does it give energy? If people are coming in to present to it, how is it always giving energy? The problem with giving energy is you have to replenish energy. So how does a team replenish it? It often just gives it out and doesn't know how to get it back. How does it work with its emotions and trust, so that you create this stability that, like an arrow, gets you to beautiful action together? I'm going through this quite quickly. Some other skills of great leadership teams that move to the Amplify effect: they know how to slow down time and be still to see new patterns. You don't see new patterns unless you slow down and find stillness. And similarly, if you don't create a compelling story that joins the dots, past, present, and future, you don't create this vitality and energy that people need for everyone else to do this. And lastly, the big one for me. This is my current love, if not hate at the same time, is this all comes together in one thing. At the top of a system, 95% of a leader's time, if not 150%, is in meetings, preparing for meetings, or having meetings about meetings. You can pretty much tell a culture and its stage of evolution through its meeting culture, which is often back-to-back, death by PowerPoint, driven by agendas and agendas of everyone in that room, as opposed to the art of thinking together and understanding that actually we can completely transform the way people meet and organisations meet. My belief is that most organisations are in a collective trance when it comes to meeting cultures, because you don't know there's a different way. I'm going to give you a glimpse of it. I can't give you the detail of it, but the key to a meeting, as I said earlier, is the beginning and the end. If you get the beginning and the end right, you can understand the rhythms of different types of input. Stop thinking that a meeting is about inputs and then the occasional conversation. It's about different types of input, being very clear on the intention of an input. Is the input for update? Is the intention of the input to share work in progress? Is the intention to explore? Is the intention to make a decision? Often, when you say, what's the point of that input? People don't have a clear answer, other than I need to be on the agenda. What is the point of the input? Both for the person giving it, and more importantly, for the person receiving it. If it's an update, I know you're giving me an update, so I just need to ask questions for clarification. If it's for exploration, then I know that I'm going to meander and wander and push the boundaries. If you're asking for feedback, I've got to listen in a way that's going to give you useful feedback. Most people don't understand that there is a paradigm shift happening around meetings, and one of the challenges we were given by a large energy company is how to transform their meeting culture. Could we save them 10% of their time? And I believe the methodologies for leadership and all the things I've talked about changes about 50%, saves about 50% of their time, and makes that 50% 5 times more productive. There is a paradigm shift going on around how leaders hold space, how you learn to work in the moment differently, how you create that multiplier effect with teams, and how all of that comes together to transform the way you meet. Now, why is this about leadership? Because the only stage that a leader leads, in my view, is through the meeting. It could be an informal meeting, an ad hoc meeting, a side conversation. It's still a meeting of human beings. The platform on which leaders lead, the art of leadership, manifests in the meeting. How you think, how you talk, how you hold space, at the top of a system. And if you can get those 4 things right, my view is you can create that hum more regularly, more frequently. It reshapes you. It moves you into a state of being on purpose and in flow. And it sounds odd, but when you do that, you can start creating music together, where everyone's difference comes into harmony, and you surprise yourself, where you create bigger stories, where everyone's separate story has its own place of strength. That's the job of leaders, tune space. Thank you.
Thank you, Nick. This is now Q&A time and an opportunity for you to ask some questions. I think looking at the time, we've got time for about a couple of questions.
Or none.
Or none?
Hello, Elaine from AMP. Really keen to understand what are the signals you see in organisations when you first walk into them to just identify whether they're in tune or otherwise. I will ask you about AMP, but I'm not going there. Think about another organisation.
So first of all, it's an energetic. It's first a felt experience. And I think you can tune into whether there is this deep purpose-driven system or whether it's busy. I don't know how you pick that up, I just pick that up in my body. But one of the quick signs is often how quickly and easily do I get to see some of the key people, particularly the CEO. If it's 3 weeks away, but if I can bump into the CEO or you can bump into key people and they have the ability just to slow down and meet rather than have to be scheduled in, that would be one of the first things I notice. If the leader and the leadership team are time rich, then they're doing something really exciting. There's a few others, but that's my main metric. And when they do meet, are they present? Are they really listening? Because that's their skill set, or are they just going through the motions? So being present and slowing down rather than just another thing.
We may need to start programming the lifts from level 24 down.
Interesting.
Hi, my name's Anne-Marie from AMP. Earlier today, somebody came out in one of the breaks and was getting us to change our behaviour, so we had to do this thing with our fingers. And it was really hard. I don't know if anyone else did it, but they said it takes about 6 weeks to, if you practice all the time, to change that behaviour. And these techniques that you're talking about require a change in behaviour within a system that's reinforcing an existing set of behaviour and attitudes. Mm-hmm. And so I'm wondering, how long does that take and how do you make that leap?
It's a great question. So I don't think it's behavioural first and foremost. I think behaviour shifts subsequently, but I don't think that's the lever. I'm not a big fan of behavioural change because I don't think it often works. However, it doesn't mean you should shift behaviour, but it's an outcome rather than a starting point. So a lot of these things I talked about here come back to about 8 to 12 simple skills. And they are practical, simple things, like knowing how to deeply listen with your body, like knowing how to capture insights. There's about 8 or 10 things. None of them are massively complicated, but they can take a lifetime to master. Listening is a great example. Always learning to listen. I believe that you can give those skills very simply at scale across a system, which isn't behavioural. But how you use them and put them together in combination is the thing that makes the difference and shifts the system. So for me, instead of teaching breakthrough, the most powerful way is to teach leaders how to lead and create moments of breakthrough. So it's done experientially. And then they learn to do it again. And then the system says, I want to learn how to do that. And the system pulls a new way of working, rather than you cascade change into a system. And you've got to give it examples, like peak experience. You've got to give the system experiences of doing things differently to get different results. Then you have to help them understand how it works. And then naturally the system goes, I want to learn how to do that. And they pull.
So positive deviance.
But driven through the concept of peak experience. So it's not more, it's different.
One more question, thanks.
Hi, it's Jeff Brunton from AMP Capital. Maybe just a little more depth on how you see good teams replenish energy.
Really good one. I think it works at a number of different levels. At one level, I think you replenish energy by learning to give and receive feedback to each other. So this notion which builds trust and quality of contact. I think the exhilaration of going into the unknown replenishes energy. You're in it together and you bind, which gives you energy. And I think being a team that's a hungry learner rather than just action orientated. How do you constantly import new input? So you're replenishing. You're not a closed system. So being an open system that's replenishing itself, and that's designed in. It's not just a nice to have, it's designed in. And that for me is the killer of any system, a team or an organisation. Nokia is a great example. It became a closed system. It stopped importing energy and it started to overly believe in itself. And it just shrank and shrank and shrank. But I think the most important thing that replenishes us is being in a group where there is deep trust, deep quality of contact, and you are constantly pushing each other in service of a bigger endeavour. And that is, I think, where human beings come to life, in service of creating something. Not doing something, creating something. And so that quality of contact, I think, is the deepest replenishment of any human system. Contact. Genuine, deep contact.
Thank you. We're almost out of time. Nick, I want to thank you for
Pleasure.
wonderful insight into leadership. You've given us a lot to think about, and wish you all the best.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.